All right, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. I'm your host, Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty, and we're going to have a conversation tonight with the Federal Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, Helen Zille, on what is effectively a very important question around the future and the sanctity, if I can use that word, religious connotations aside, of the South African judiciary. Are we a society that is based on the rule of law and a adherence to law and order? Now, I'm not going to waffle on, just to remind you, as I always do, that whether you're watching this broadcast on Facebook, X, or on YouTube, guys, smash that like button, hit that like button, and help me grow my engagement. As you're streaming in, let me know where you're watching from. That's always a great way to find out the broadness of my audience. And of course, do me a solid favor. If it is on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Help me reach my goal of 45,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I think we're quite close to that goal, actually, somewhere around 44,800, I think. So that's looking rather good. And of course, remember, we have a website. It's slightly down at the moment, but it is at bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, enough of the jibber jabber from me. I have as I mentioned, the DA's Federal Chairperson, Helen Zille. Let me bring her up on screen. Helen, good evening.
Hi there, Big Daddy, or Big Daddy, or Usihle. I'm Helen.
Oh, there you go, Helen. Good to see you. We're going to be rather brief tonight because I think tonight's issue really is one which you've already prosecuted in the court, or at least you've put on the first salvo, I think is the expression here, by having filed papers this week in court. We're referring, of course, to the disgraced former judge president of the Western Cape High Court, John Hlophe, who now is a member of parliament for the Umkhonto weSizwe party. This is the same individual, Helen, who, from the graces of literally being judge president, was effectively impeached by the JSC and fired by parliament. That chap now sits on the very same body, that's the Judicial Services Committee, which effectively fired him. Now, before I have you open up, I'm going to put on screen here the actual press release from the Democratic Alliance, and we'll take it from there. I want to read this little excerpt here, which basically explains that your application as the DA is twofold. In the first part, you seek to urgently interdict John Hlope from taking up a seat in the JSC, that's the Judicial Services Committee, pending the outcome of the second part, in which you seek a review and the setting aside of the decision by the National Assembly, that's Parliament, to designate him as one of the parliamentary representatives of the JSC. Helen, I must come straight to you on this one. Explain the rationale here. Why was it important for the DA to take this matter to court?
Well, the DA has very long championed the independence of the judiciary, as every single South African should, because our democracy depends on it. And the JSC, the Judicial Services Commission, has certain functions, and one of those functions is to nominate judges for appointment to the bench. Now, they undertake those interviews, and then they nominate judges. And as far as the DA is concerned, there are far too many politicians on that body. We think there should be really respected retired jurists and other legal academics and other people who really understand the law on that body, but there are politicians. And we think that if politicians have to be there, they should be far fewer in number, because we really believe it's important to entrench the independence of the judiciary from the political process, and certainly from party politics. Nevertheless, under the law and under the Constitution as it stands, Parliament may designate representatives of various political parties to the JSC, and the only constraint on Parliament in terms of the total number is that 3 of those have to be from opposition parties. So the ANC can't take the whole lot. And obviously, MK...
Helen, sorry, I don't...
Can you hear me?
Okay. We're definitely having some gremlins. Helen, the line is very bad.
Right.
Basically lost you at the point of explaining why having as many politicians as there are on the commission is not a problem to an extent. Do you want to just maybe take it from there? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
You're back.
No.
When you asked whether we can hear you, we heard that.
All right, good. Let me go then. So there's too many politicians, but nevertheless, politicians do have the right to propose representatives, and MK also has that right. What we're saying is it makes no rational sense for Parliament to designate someone who has been impeached and fired through the Judicial Service Commission to be a member of that very body to interview and propose judges for appointment to the bench. Now, obviously, our constitution writers could never have envisaged that any such thing would have been a possibility, but it's turned out to be. And of course, it's a threat to the independence of the judiciary, and it's a threat to the credibility of the judiciary, and it's also irrational, and all the decisions by organs of state have to be rational. So we've basically taken it on those grounds, and we've asked for two remedies. The first remedy is to interdict John Hlophe from taking up that seat. And the second is to go back to Parliament and say, you erred, you made a mistake. Doesn't mean to say MK can't have a representative, but they just can't have John Hlophe. Now, we must also remember, but John Hlophe was impeached for a very, very serious... John Hlophe was impeached.
Helen.
Okay, John Hlophe was impeached and fired for a very, very serious breach of judicial ethics. In fact, it was called gross misconduct by the JSC because he had gone to members of the Constitutional Court, no less, to try and influence them to make a judgment in favor of Jacob Zuma. And that was 16 years ago. And the DA has been fighting this matter ever since.
Absolutely, and rightly so. And again, it's important that you mention that point that this is a matter that's long in the tooth, as far back as 16 years ago, because one of the arguments seemingly that John Hlope himself is making in response to this is, well, actually, I haven't been given an opportunity to due process. Speaking to the SABC in an interview and with this issue being posed to him, this was his response. I'm going to play this briefly, Helen. Please bear with me.
Right. Well, in my case specifically, what had happened was this. We challenged the processes and how the Judicial Service Commission operated. We challenged even the composition of the Judicial Service Commission. We even brought an appeal to challenge the decision by President Cyril Ramaphosa to suspend me. That matter is still pending in Gauteng. We're not even allocated a date for that appeal. In one matter, because they withdrew funding. As a result of withdrawing funding, I could not prosecute the appeal. This is why one of the grounds that we use, we're saying the impeachment process by Parliament was premature because everything was pending before the courts, including the Constitutional Court. But
well, there you have it, Helen. Therein lies the argument by Hlophe that this is all pending before the courts. The JSC itself as an institution simply jumped the gun. 16 years, of that. What do you make of this argument? And again, there is a broader issue at play here that I'm going to just introduce in a third question.
Well, this is the famous Stalingrad defense that has become standard in South Africa, especially by people who have limitless funds because the state is paying for them. And this is a major, major problem. He says he ran out of runway when the state eventually stopped paying for his cases. Now, if he says he hasn't finished the process yet, if he wants to challenge the Judicial Service Commission's finding, and if he wants to challenge Parliament's decision, and if she wants to challenge Cyril Ramaphosa's decision, That's fine. He's free to do so, but he's not fit to sit on the Judicial Service Commission until the time that those cases are resolved. Because if you're going to follow a Stalingrad defense, which means we will be in court for the next 16 years, then he'll be sitting on this critical body, the Judicial Service Commission, for all of that time. And who knows? For all we know, and certainly the findings up till now, has said he is guilty of seeking to influence the outcome of the Constitutional Court, which makes it impossible for somebody with a credible case hanging over his head and who's been found by his peers in the Judicial Service Commission to have been guilty of gross misconduct to be sitting choosing our judges. So, okay, he can go through the process, go through the whole process. And if in the end he wins throughout that whole process, however long it takes, then he can be nominated to the Judicial Service Commission.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Helen, I've lost you on my side. I have no
Oh,
idea if
dear.
you're still speaking.
I can hear you. I
You'll
can hear
forgive me
you.
if you are. But
Yeah.
perhaps I hear you now. Let's wrap up perhaps, because I think there's two fundamental issues that need to be unpacked at this point. The first is, and I'm seeing it already in the comment section, the usual trope is coming out, which is, there you go. Here comes the DA. It's being anti-Black, as we are hearing. Anti-African professional is a comment I'm seeing from Uthembi Nkosi Jack. Is this a matter of his race, Helen? Are you, as the DA, unhappy with him simply because he's Black excellence, as we've been hearing on social media streets this entire week?
You know, that is such a trite comment, I'm afraid. And the reason that it is that gross misconduct has got nothing to do with race. The majority of people on the JSC who found Dr. Hlope guilty of gross misconduct and recommended that Parliament fire him were Black people. So are you going to turn around and say they were all racists? Are you going to turn around and say Parliament, because they have a vast majority of Black people, are all by definition racist? That's the corollary of that argument. It's got nothing to do with race. Misconduct, gross misconduct, crime, violating an oath of office, none of that has got anything to do with race. And it's a pitiful excuse for an argument to say it has. I'm done, Sihle.
Yeah, sorry, I froze there for a bit, but I got that last bit, and perhaps it brings me to my final question, really, and it has been also echoed here in the comments. What does this mean for the future of the South African judiciary, and how can we effectively achieve that independence of the judiciary? What's the DA's role in trying to achieve that for South Africans?
Well, the DA's role is to try to ensure that the Judicial Service Commission is of the right caliber to choose the best judges to keep the judiciary independent from political parties. And we've been fighting for a long time to reduce the number of politicians on the JSC quite substantially, and to make sure that the people who sit on it are fit and proper and highly ethical people to achieve that outcome. So that is the role that we are playing. When I was Premier and had a seat ex officio on the JSC, I made sure that I sent or delegated a top legal person to go in my stead, because I thought it was going to be wrong for me as a politician to be sitting there choosing judges. So that is the change we would like to bring. But until we get that right, until we're a majority in government, we will continue fighting the most flagrant forms of abuse, political abuse, of the Judicial Service Commission to achieve political ends instead of choosing the best judges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Helen, thank you so much for your time. We must end it over there. That is, of course, the DA's Federal Chairperson. Don't know why I stuttered that, but that's Helen Zille, the DA Federal Chairperson, and massive thanks to her. And thank you, and apologies from my side, guys, for the choppy line. It's my connection. But nonetheless, Helen made the point, saliently so, and rightly so. This is about the future of the about the future and the independence of the South African judiciary. We want to be a society that is a meritocratic society that rewards the merit and the good character of individuals. And it is on that basis that nobody can accept the likes of John Hlophe on the JSC. It has nothing to do with race. And it should often warn you that it is always the last refuge of the scoundrel to basically say, oh, these attacks are coming because we're quote unquote black people being attacked, or black professionals, or black excellence. That is a very dangerous race nationalist line, and we're so accustomed to it. In fact, the very person that John Hlope is accused of having tried to improperly that is, influence a judgment for, Jacob Zuma, is very famous for that same kind of thinking. The moment he's in trouble, oh, it's those evil white people, he'll say, that are after him, negating the fact that actually the corrupt and improper nature, the dubious nature of these people's character affects black people primarily and South Africans as a whole. So again, I fully agree with the DA's stance on this one, and there are other organizations that have gone the legal route too, but DA does deserve the kudos and credit for being first out the blocks on this one. We'll keep an eye on this one, and as always, we'll be watching. With that being said, thank you for watching the show. Guys, as you make your way out, please do me that solid favor by smashing the like button. It's easy peasy. Hit the like button whether you're watching on Facebook, X, or YouTube. If it is on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. And lastly, visit us, please, at our website at bigdaddyliberty.com. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early, for another episode of the Vukanaza Show, and then on Sunday again at 8 p.m. for Liberty and Friends.